Hey there, and welcome to College is Fine, Everything's Fine, the podcast that helps you keep your head above campus chaos without losing your sense of self or your sense of humor. I'm Dr. Sarah Olivo.
And I'm Dr. Liz Seidler. We're clinical psychologists who help students navigate everything from friendship drama and academic pressure to figuring out who they are when nobody and everybody is watching.
We take real stories from college life and turn them into simple, science-backed tips you can actually use. No fluff, just what works.
Think of it as your mental health toolkit for thriving, not just surviving college life. All right, Sarah, you ready?
Yep, I'm ready. Let's get into it.
All
right.
Ready to go.
Yeah, guys, you're going to hear us be a little giggly because, long story short, 3 psychologists. How many psychologists does it take to get a camera working in a computer? And it turns out 0 psychologists and 1 psychologist's husband who solves it. Right. So we're kind of giggling because it's like, how we feel like we should be able to do these things. But, it's nice to be able to ask for help. Asking for help, it turns out, is a skill. It's a great coping skill. And so
100%.
our guest today did a great job doing that. So we're having this is an episode that I actually didn't think could happen because we had never met this person before. We had heard about her or read about her actually in a newspaper article sharing this wonderful class she'd been doing. And we'll let her talk a bit more about that. So this was like a cold call email to somebody. We thought, fingers crossed, will she talk to us? And she said yes. So we're really excited to have Dr. Shreya Hessler on today. And Shreya, would you like to say a bit more about, you're not just a professor of this class. You got a lot going on. So tell our audience about you.
Yeah, I'm kind of like a jack of all trades is what I've been saying lately. So I'm a licensed psychologist, much like you guys. Trained as a pediatric psychologist, but basically as they all grew up, I grew with them. So now I see folks across the lifespan, and I have been in higher education in and out for at the collegiate level for most of my career. But after a long time hiatus, I decided to develop a class at my doctoral alma mater at Loyola University in Maryland called Digital Detox, Doing Nothing and Doing Well. And it was probably one of the best experiences I've ever had in my professional career. So I'm super excited to talk about it.
Oh my goodness. I'm excited to hear about it. Okay. So how did this come to be? You said like after a hiatus, you decided to kind of like dive back into teaching. And I think, this is a hot topic on parents, therapists, college students, like our relationship with the online world. So tell us a little bit more.
So as I was saying before that I had been kind of in clinical practice. So I have a practice outside of Baltimore, seeing folks across the lifespan. And 2 things happened kind of at the same time. The first was, again, I was watching these teenagers and entering 3rd decade clients kind of really struggle with some things that we've been seeing, right, in the research, et cetera, with loneliness and connectivity, et cetera, and social media use, et cetera. And then at the same time, I have 3 Gen Zers myself in my home, or used to be in my home. And so part of the impetus for me to develop this class was what I was seeing an absence of in clinical practice and in execution. But then also, like, who's taking care of my 3 kids,
Right.
in teaching them these skills that we know work really well for, this particular developmental stage in their life. So since I was doing some homework and research and realized nobody was teaching a class about the how-to, and here's why it matters so much versus put down your phone or put down the device, I created kind of this hybrid experiential learning class, really rooted in psychological science. So what we know works really well, right? In terms of wellness, and scaffolded it. And we didn't just do the things, but we experienced it. And the most important part of the class was that it was completely analog, meaning nothing with an on and off switch was allowed in the class. So no buzzing, no alerts, no notifications. That once they crossed through the door into my classroom, for that hour and 20 minutes, twice a week, they had no access to technology. And they got a journal and a pen from me on the first day of class. And I said, let's do this together. So cool.
So cool. And we got to talk a little bit before this interview, and we were sharing that over the kind of years that and decades really that we've been working with folks, that it started off with, oh, I was talking to my friend and yada yada yada, and then we were saying at some point we had to start saying like, oh wait, hold on, was that conversation over text or in person? Because we kind of wanted to get a
Yeah.
sense of it. And then now we just assume it's over text, right? That we just see that there's a lot of these conversations are coming up. And so I also can recognize that here we are. I mean, I don't want to say boomers. I would like to say that we are a very cool generation called Gen X that I think, it's pretty cool, guys, right?
Yeah.
Guys, you're
I
amazing.
mean, I think we lived in the best eras ever, grew up in the, like, there's no track record of what we all did.
Yeah, right. So
Right.
I think we have this sort of like nostalgia for that time. But I also know that people, if I remember being that age, right, and we all do, because that was such an important part of our time, I did not want to hear a bunch of people older than me talk about the glory days, et cetera, and how evil social media is. And granted, we have one relationship with it, and they will have understandably a much different relationship with it that is also very valid. But your students experience something different besides like, oh, social media is bad. And have you figured out that special sauce yet?
Yeah, I think like so certainly the class was like a beta test, right? Like this was what was I seeing in the real world as a practitioner, right?
Mhm.
And you're exactly right. We don't want to sound like boomers, like in my day, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Instead, the conversation has always been about every class was about a couple of things: intention, critical thinking, connection, right? And a fourth piece that
Right.
my students, if you ever talked with them, would say I said at nauseum, which is discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
So, as the three of us are clinicians, we, especially as anxiety specialists, like we revel in the world of discomfort, right?
Love
And
it.
so, like, trying to scaffold that for these students and doing it together. So, I do think that, like, that secret sauce is even if we're scrolling, like, right, like my feed now is all about digital detox stuff if I'm ever looking at social media, because those algorithms kind of pull.
Yeah.
But when
Mm.
you're looking at it at an individual level versus doing it together as a class, and your professor's doing it with you, and simultaneously, we're not saying abstinence. We're saying this is where we are, this is where we
Mhm.
all are, and this is how you use it for the good
Mm-hmm.
and for your health and your well-being. And can you complement with creativity, with human connection, with this thing called conversation versus communication? So we had a whole bunch of conversations about how to have a conversation in person with eye
Mhm.
contact. And at the overarching kind of goal for me was, can I do this so that the students walk out of the classroom feeling seen, feeling like they have something to contribute, right? And not feeling shamed for whatever it is that they did.
Mm.
Right.
And I think that was the piece. That's why I feel like it's a real strong component to bring the psychological piece. It was a 400 level psychology class, so it wasn't like a 1 credit class.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where I've been sitting with it for like the last like 6 weeks or so since the class ended, you know?
Yeah. I know we have other questions to ask, but I will come back to that idea, and you really helped me see that more during our conversation, like when it was one of those aha moments. Like, so much of the conversation, I think you're right, ends up being about, social media is bad. If you're on it, you should be ashamed. Your generation should sort of be ashamed. I know so many
Yeah.
people for a while were like, I guess I know I'm a millennial, so then therefore I suck, right? And it's like, I know I'm a
Yeah.
Gen Zer, so therefore I'm this. And it's like, yikes, that has to feel really crappy. So I
Well,
love
yeah.
the idea that you want to flip that switch.
Yeah. Well, and at the end of the day, if you want improvement to happen, as you and I both know, like you've got to be able to meet them halfway
Hmm.
and see how hard it is to be them.
Yeah.
Right. And help them like feel grounded in that, to say that's okay that you don't know, and that's okay that you're feeling the way that you do, and let's do it together.
Hmm.
Um, and I felt like that made a really big difference.
Yeah. Like, this is hard for us too. as people who didn't grow up with it. Like, we
Right,
struggle.
Exactly.
We have the
right.
same
Yeah.
things we have to think about.
Well, first, just like mention that my sixth grader last night told me she needed blue light glasses just from all the time she spends on her Chromebook in classes
Mhm.
throughout the day, which was like a real thing that I did not expect to happen in middle school, that like most of her learning was taking place in front of a computer. So I love the idea of having a course that does not require any technology while you're in the
Mhm.
classroom, and that we can bring it back to the basics, which I think writing has become a long lost art, which is wild for me to think about. But anyway, you have a TED Talk, which I really
Oh, that's nice.
I
Yeah.
really encourage people to watch. You're such a good speaker, and you talk a lot about stumble stories, and we could do a whole nother episode, I feel like, on that.
And your
But
outfit slaps.
right, we did have a stumble story right before this, guys.
We had one like in lifetime right before this whole
I
thing
know, we should
started.
have actually recorded that if we could have been like, let's just hear this. Be like,
But to connect with, Sarah was saying, and it's so interesting. I feel like kids are dying for social media and more like access to screen time. It's like one of those things, like this milestone they chase, right? In terms of having access to technology. But then there's a lot of messaging around their usage of social media and technology. Can you say more about like either what you've heard from college students or your clients around the reactions they're getting from people in their environment around their usage of social media?
So I think the thing that I walk away with oftentimes, particularly in this class, is this idea that they didn't know they needed it. They needed it um,
Yeah.
until they, and when I say needed it, like the separation, they
Yep.
didn't know that they needed it until they experienced it.
mm,
And, in psychology, we all talk about that extinction burst of the
mhm.
discomfort, right?
Yep.
And so what that really translates to for most people is that usually if we can get to that point of discomfort and that body sensation of not feeling comfortable comes down, right? That
Right.
you tend to feel better and then you realize you don't know um what it looks like
Looks like. Yeah.
with the absence of it, right? And
Yeah.
so what a lot of the students were telling me during the course of the semester was I didn't know how I was using time. I didn't know that I really wasn't paying attention. I didn't know that I hadn't been making eye contact. I think my patience, when I scaffold that for them and do it with them, I think it's noteworthy that one of the aha moments I had to propose and develop this class came from when I was offering suggestions to patients, and they would come back and say, Dr. H, I can't do it. Like, I
Mm.
can't do it. And I said, well, we have a 50-minute conversation every week without any technology about hard things.
Mm-hmm.
So that tells me you absolutely can do it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You're
Very
just
well.
not giving yourself like opportunity to do it,
Right.
right? And so that's kind of the feedback that I'm trying to like reframe for them, because here's the other thing. It's not just this generation of kids that are doing this stuff. Like, we all are doing it, right? So
Right.
it's not like a big drastic difference either.
Right.
But I do think that the students are feeling like the students themselves were like, "Oh, I didn't know. I didn't know I'm walking across campus and I haven't made eye contact with anybody crossing the
Mm.
quad."
Yeah.
You know?
And
And
they're
those
not
small
alone,
things
right?
matter.
Everybody is sort of
That's
staring down,
it.
right? So that's
Yeah.
the norm.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that I have to, when you say extinction burst, a short way of saying that is it gets worse before it gets better, right?
That's
Like,
it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
so it kind of
Yeah.
builds that discomfort, and then if you kind of if you get to that peak of discomfort and we're like, oh, this is so hard, I can't do it, then you feel kind of trapped in it. So it's that idea of like, all right, how do I get over that hump, stay
Yeah.
either bored or uncomfortable or what have you, uncertain about how to handle a situation if don't have my phone to stare at.
Mm-hmm.
I am someone who drives around kids who are teenagers or tweens, and I notice that the minute the people will get in my car, they all have their phones on. And because I'm guessing, being in a car is a little boring. They know me. I'm gonna ask some questions. They're probably like, "Oh, okay, here she comes," you know? And I try not to be like, "Catch your fast down, kid," you know, but I just noticed it's so interesting that because of that, right, it's that automatic kind of having it, and so, um but I get it, right? And it's so I would never want to say to either my son or someone else, like, no, you can't do that. You must stare at the road while all your friends. So it's this complicated thing where it's not just in a vacuum that people are like, oh, I just don't want to feel bored. Like they're
Right.
walking around and they might not have a group of people who are on board with what they're doing or still don't know yet that they like the separation or need the separation. So
Yeah.
that's the other piece of it. And I think that one of the things you mentioned, so you've got your course, which people, of course, they don't necessarily have access to unless they take it. But in your TED Talk, you also bring in some things about how kids, even as young as 10, have these sort of things that they look to be. Some of the words you used were like a social butterfly or artistic prodigy, elite athlete, these labels. And as psychologists, we know that power for better, for worse of labels. Like I am a perfectionist, I am perfect, or I'm a failure, and how those labels shift our mood. Have your students shared how social media can perpetuate or depower some of those labels?
Yeah. So I think it really hits the nail on the head when it's not just about achieving and having highlight worthy like accolades that could be, you know, endorsed with likes and comments and kind of filling our cups in that way. But the challenge is that in those moments, then as they get reinforced, then that's the message that they receive, that if
Mm-hmm.
they don't do something that is accolade or noteworthy, etc. And by the way, that's not just academic or professional, but also social, right? Like posting on your stories, etc., to see yourself busy, so and interactive in actual ways that are not genuine.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that polarizes what our sense of worth is. Either you're all amazing and you're all like not worthy. And the in between is where most of life is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, those stumbles I think end up getting silenced. So there's the expectation now the students are reporting oftentimes that they have to achieve so much. It's almost like we already see high schools like that, right? A resume
Oh, yeah.
builder for college
Right.
admissions, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's a war zone. I mean, I literally have used that word over and over again. We're talking now in admission, season with
Yeah.
like the
Oh,
final
right.
jaunt of
Yeah.
it, right? And it is a war zone, but we don't label it that way, but they certainly feel that way,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
right?
Right. The,
And
like, chest tightness,
all of
oh,
that
God,
anxiety, right?
oh,
And like you
no.
only go to one college, right?
Right.
So the same thing then once they get there,
Yeah.
right? And that's why I love working in higher ed in particular, because there's a lot of work, with the anxious generation, K to K, 12, bell to bell, no phones. I think those are steps in the right direction, but a lot of Gen
Mhm.
Z got missed,
Yep.
right? So being able to have these conversations and them reporting back that I didn't realize how much it was impacting me, even though I heard that it was not great for me, until I actually did the exercises in long term, repeated twice a week over several months.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I thought
Mhm.
that made a difference. They said it made a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What were some of like if you just mentioned these exercises? Like what were some of the questions like for our listeners that they could maybe ask themselves to reflect on their relationship with their phone?
Yeah. I often, a lot of my background in working with students with learning differences is always about multisensory intervention, right? So, can you use multiple senses to kind of ground yourself when you're going to do an activity that potentially has the pull of putting you in a direction that you don't want to be in. So I'm going to pick up my phone, like literally saying it out loud, even if you're in a room by yourself. I'm going to pick up my phone and check the weather. I'm going to pick up my phone and check my
Mm.
assignments. And then I'm going to do this. The more you actually use multiple senses to say it, sing it, however you want to describe it, the easier it is to um, follow through with your intention.
Yeah.
Right. We all have great intentions, but I always talk to the students about, can you, as opposed to, picking up your phone on the automatic, notice when you're doing it, name it with like, what am I going to get out of it for doing it? And oftentimes if it's boredom, can you go do something else? I'm going to pick up my phone and do this, and I'm going to go do something else first, make a snack, use the bathroom, whatever it might be, right? And then come back to it. And do I feel the same urge to do what it is that I was going to do in the first place?
Yeah.
Right. And those are things I think we can all do. And the other thing I was going to mention is that in my class, I had 3 students who lived together. They just happened to all take the same class, right? So they were doing things like practicing different things together
That's
outside of
cool.
class. It was so cool, right? Because they felt like they could hold each other accountable, do things together, right? Especially like creative things together, and then talk about it, and how, it was impacting them for the better, which I thought was really great too. It's like almost a little mini experiment inside the
Right.
class, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't imagine, like, sorry, I was just gonna say quickly, as you were describing the picking up of the phone thing and labeling it, like if I was gonna say to myself, I'm picking up my phone now to spend the next 20 minutes looking at short videos of English bulldogs, I might not do it as much, right? If I was just like, I am
Yeah.
now doing it just out of habit because it was,
Yeah.
I could have, because sometimes it's so automatic, you're
Yeah.
5 minutes in and you're like, what? And so even just to check in, being like, okay, I'm going to continue looking at all these silly reels, or doom scrolling or whatever that version is. That idea of like, I can essentially label it, gives a little bit
Yep.
of a distance, right? You can kind of catch yourself
Sure
from it.
does.
So, yeah.
Right. Yeah. It reminds me so much. We talk obviously a lot in our clinical work, and we've talked about in the podcast how just saying things out loud, right, increases awareness to your experience. And I think, once you get past the like silliness of narrating your life, right, it's so much harder to not like act on automatic pilot, right? When
Right.
you're not really aware of what you're actually doing. So I love
Yep.
that in terms of being able to get distance from our experience and hopefully make more intentional choices. And I'm a huge fan of delaying, um, like basically like delaying doing something, right? And a lot of
Yeah.
times I always just say like, even just go to a different room, like go do something else. And I imagine like your urge might be different to engage in the behavior, or maybe you might notice something that might help you weigh the pros and cons of doing something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. And when you think about senses too, there are a lot of times where, okay, so we have the sense of taste, touch, et cetera, smell. And
Right.
I like that idea of saying like, well, how does even your body feel? If you're
Yeah.
doing it and your shoulders are hunched, or you're doing it and because there are definitely times as again, you're kind of making me think a little bit and go back, where I'm like, I'm doing it and I can, if I stop for a second, I would be able to tell it wasn't making me feel great.
Yeah.
Or I
Yeah.
have a lot of times where I'm doing it and I'm like, this is just what I needed. I just needed to turn my brain off. And if I could be looking at reels of something, same reels, same whatever, and it can make me feel bad or good. Right. But
So I also think that we were talking about like the all on, all off, right? The
Yeah.
abstinence type of piece, which is not really a reality, right? And so I always like posited any type of separation, intentional separation with my students, or even with my clients as an experiment. Let's just try this for a
Yeah.
week. Try it for 3 days.
yeah.
Can you leave your phone? Like I just had a conversation with a patient not earlier this week about she's in her 20s. So can you try like leaving your phone downstairs before you go to bed? And then do all your morning routine in the morning and then come back. Let's just try it for a week. Next week, check in with me and see how you feel. So I've done like those types of things as opposed to you should in an
Right.
absolute for the rest of your life, because
Mhm.
we all know that doesn't work, but it is
Right.
actually what they hear, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
More
That
times than not.
judgment, the shame. Yeah,
Hmm.
for sure.
Yeah.
Um, I'm wondering, to kind of reflect on, we talked a lot about examining their relationship with their phone, with social media. I'm wondering if we like zoomed out a little bit. Did you see any shifts in how these students manage like other decisions that are outside of the scope of their screen usage? Like, did it kind of generalize maybe to decision making in other areas of their life, relationships, etc.?
Yeah. I mean, I think that was the most fascinating part of the class, right? Both within the class and outside the class. So I mentioned that three of the students were
Yeah.
roommates, but they didn't always sit together. Their social interaction in the class, um, I saw kind of organically evolve over time, right? And working together. I mean, no college student ever loves group work.
No.
And these guys killed it in their group assignments. It was fantastic, right? And then they would report back that they just spent more time being present with each other,
Mm.
going back to like even saying hello to people across campus, right? Could they sit in the cafe on campus and not pull out their
The
phones, et
phone.
cetera,
Yeah.
but like have a conversation? So a lot of improvement reporting of qualitative improvement in their
Mm-hmm.
relationships and in the quality of the conversations. And I think the most profound thing was their capacity to attend. It took some
Yeah.
time, but
Yeah.
Mhm.
they could really attend to what the other person was saying.
Mm-hmm.
And that I thought was pretty awesome, very qualitatively
Right.
to hear back of that.
Yeah. But like the muscle, that social muscle starts to get stronger.
Yeah.
I
And
love
repeating on their own, right? So
that.
like
Mhm.
if they did an activity, then they independently, like that was an assignment, they like went on some nature walks by themselves. Like they repeated what they thought they got value out of and then
Mhm.
reflected on it and talked
Mhm.
about it in class, which I thought was great.
Yeah, I love that. Oh my gosh, I could
Uh,
talk to you all day.
No, it makes
Uh,
me, yeah, it makes me so excited. I really think, part of and probably why you love this population is like, I don't know, they're movers and shakers. Like it just makes me
Yeah.
excited. I think like we see more and more curiosity about the cost of the digital landscape and how it impacts people, and I'm just like excited to kind of see where this goes, and grateful that we were able to kind of see some of the work that you're doing, and I hope I can like take some of it to my own clinical work, my kids relationships with technology
Yeah.
as it begins to grow. It's been awesome.
right. Thank you for sharing some of that. That you work really hard to create this course, and you're sharing some of that for free with our audience means a lot. So, we'll certainly we'll post your TED Talk too because there's so many gems in there, and
Mm.
so we'll make sure that they get to have access to that. And we would love to have you back. So,
Yeah. I'll be back anytime you want me to. This is stuff
oh,
that
Well,
is like
now
great to talk about.
we worked really hard to get technology running, so now
yeah,
we
You
are like
did.
now we know how to work the camera in Riverside. We are good. We
Yes.
we almost
Yes.
have to do a
we're
second
ready to go.
trial. Yeah.
I know. All right. Thank
All
you
right.
so much. Thanks for
You
coming.
got it.
By the way, does anyone listen to outros? Should we do one anyway?
Thanks for tuning in to College is Fine, Everything's Fine. We hope you're walking away with skills you can use right now, whether you're just beginning to think about college, starting your first semester, or counting down to graduation.
If you like today's episode, you know what to do. Subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend or your roommate or your parents or that random person you keep seeing on the quad. Please don't be shy.
Want more tools, tip sheets, or courses? Head to collegeisfinepodcast.com or follow us on Instagram and TikTok at College is Fine Podcast.
We'll catch you next time with more real talk, more skills, and more of what actually works on campus. Until then, remember that we are rooting for you.